Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Hassan, and this is TV7's Israel update. And in today's edition, we're going to focus on three pillars of the region, currently, obviously, areas of interest to include the Gaza Strip. Where are we currently standing? Obviously, the Board of Peace is being set up by the Trump administration. It is now officially an international organization. What is the viability of realizing those plans that the Trump administration is trying to push forward with the help of parts of the international community? Next to that, Lebanon. Obviously, Israel is still very closely monitoring, and not only monitoring, it's engaging the Iranian proxy Hezbollah. What are the challenges there? And lastly, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced, of course, that a USS aircraft carrier is moving into the region. He referred to it as an armada. There's more than that already en route to this Central Command AOR, or Area of Responsibility. And are we expected to see a clash? That is a big question mark for all of us. But before all that, let's introduce our experts for today, to include Mr. Amir Owen, our TV7 editor-at-large. Next to him, Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of Intelligence at Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. And last but not least is Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, formerly the commander of the Israeli Air Force Air and Missile Defense. It's great to have all three of you with us today, and I'd like to start with you, Mr. Oren. The complexities related to the Board of Peace are many. Give us a little bit of the headlines about this topic, since we already touched somewhat on this yesterday during our program of TV7 Israel's update. But what are we to take into account? And not everybody is necessarily prescribed into joining President Trump's Board of Peace. Why is that? Go ahead.
The imminent one has to do with Iran and whether President Trump will give the go-ahead. And the immediate, rather than the imminent one, has to do with Gaza. Now, look at the timetable, at the schedule. Here we are at the end of January, and on January the 31st, the nominations for this year's Nobel Peace Prize are to be handed in. Whatever is said after that has public relations value, but is not counted. So President Trump has made his move just in time to be included in this year's deliberations, where he has quite a chance to finally get his prize. However, that was at the launch of the Board of Peace, and now come the more mundane task of making it work. And the first task, of course, is Gaza. Are we going to see Hamas disarm? Is it going to be a pilot project where it starts with the southern part of the Strip, Rafah, and then Khan Yunis, where there are no more armed Hamas cells? So it's very easy to say that this is an arms-free zone. What will happen later with Jared Kushner's plan for reconstructing the Strip to make it a sort of an Abu Dhabi on the Mediterranean, with luxury towers, with billionaires coming from all over the Gulf area and indeed the world in order to swim in the warm waters of the Mediterranean and so on, and the International Stabilization Force. Are we going to see countries really contributing troops and willing to fight Hamas and other militias or gangs if necessary? These are all
That is a very good point. And a very good question. And on that specifically, we did hear Jared Kushner, the son in law and special envoy of President Trump, unveil the plans for the beautiful strip, really a grandiose infrastructure that will also seek to draw in foreign investments to make such a reality possible. But he also acknowledges this cannot be a viable reality unless security is brought about. And on this, General Sofrin, bring about security, as was also mentioned here time and again, requires the disarmament not only of the Islamist Hamas, a terrorist organization that seeks the eradication of the state of Israel, but also of its affiliated terror groups and those it rivals. How can such an international stabilization force actually bring about such a scenario when those people, I mean, they grew up with a weapon in their crib?
You are right, Jonathan. I think that this is a very ambitious and very maybe plan that can't be implied. And I will elaborate a little bit. I think that first of all, no matter who is going to attend in this ISF, International Stabilization Force, will not challenge Hamas and will not fight Hamas in order to dismantle it. Nobody is willing to get into clashes, armed clashes, that may cause injuries and casualties on both sides, and especially on the ISF side. Nobody is willing to die for dismantling Hamas in Gaza. Now, President Trump gave, and his staff, of course, gave a period of time of 100 days to dismantle Hamas. At the beginning, he spoke about 30 days, and now it's 100 days. Even 100 days is not enough if you take, for example, what happens in South Lebanon, and you make the comparison. The Lebanese armed forces told us that South Lebanon is what we call a zone without weapon systems of Hamas. Of Hezbollah. They dismantled the whole area. And suddenly the IDF is finding out that Hezbollah is still in South Lebanon. They have infrastructures. They are there. They're trying to get back and to build up their capacity. And our attacks is aimed to deny that. I don't see any option in Gaza that the ISF will dismantle Hamas by its own force. So maybe Israel will be forced to do that with the permission of the US and the green light from the US. Otherwise, of course, it won't be happened. And on the other hand, I think that speaking about 100 days is not realistic. It will take a very long time, if in all. And in the end, not all the weapon systems will be dismantled, and Hamas will stay with a lot of weapon systems concealed in several ways, in several areas. And therefore, the threat is there and is imminent for the coming years as well.
Well, one of the points that was also raised by the American Special Envoy Kushner, that is, was that there's a lot of rhetoric going around between Israel, Turkey, and Qatar, and he mentioned those three countries in particular, saying that it's unhelpful to bring about the aspired resolution. Obviously, Qatar, not so much, but Turkey, rather, is very keen on sending troops into Gaza and to assist in bringing about what it interprets as disarming the Islamist Hamas. Naturally, Israel does not view that as a positive development, despite the fact that the Turks are telling the Americans, we are a restraining force both in Syria as well as in other locations. Here, too, we can be a contributing force. Gerald Gavish, why not? Why does Israel stand in its way? And why is it concerned? Some may think this is a rhetorical question, but what is the root cause to Israel's objections?
Well, first we have to remember that the Turkish government, the best way is always to look on their act, not on what they're saying. And when we are seeing the way that they were acting in the last few years by supporting Hamas more than anyone else, Of course, we've seen what is happening in Syria. Of course, we are seeing what is happening with him supporting the Muslim Brothers or Brotherhood. This is the challenge with the Turks. They want to be a superpower. They're not saying it openly, but I think that Erdogan would be very happy to go back to the Ottoman Empire. This is probably his vision. This is a very challenging development from the Israeli point of view. And the last thing that we need is in the downside of Israel, very close to the Israeli border, to the Israeli towns around the Gaza Strip. We would have a Turkish military that they are supporting the Hamas, and it would be very hard to control. And of course, for Israel, we always want to make sure that it is understandable to anyone that if the Hamas is not going to collaborate, we always keep to ourselves the option to do it ourselves. And at the end of the day, we have to remember also that Turkey is a very strong and powerful NATO allied country. So it is very challenging from all those various reasons to have the Mir inside Israel. By the way, we are not the only one that we don't like in this region, the Turks and the Qatars inside the Gaza Strip. I'm sure that others, if you would ask the Saudis, I think that they see it exactly with us. I'm not sure that the Egyptians are very happy from it. So this is a very challenging situation from the Israeli point of view.
Even after the security arrangements and closing in the ranks between the Saudis, not Qataris, Pakistanis, and Turks. General Sofian, I'd like to ask you on this because it seems like there is a warming of relations between those three. Obviously, Saudi Arabia has had very close relations with the Pakistanis for years. They also bankroll their nuclear program, or at least the upkeep of their nuclear program, among others, and they have various agreements between the two. And in parallel, also the Turks and the Pakistanis have very close relations, which also culminated in the show of friction, the aggression against India and the counterattacks, which obviously erupted into almost a full-fledged war, were it not for the American intervention. But on that new type of closing in of relations, is that something that Israel should be concerned about?
I'm sure Israel should be concerned about. First of all, if we take the three countries, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan has a long way going together and cooperating on what we call on defense issues. And there were rumors, of course, that the Pakistanis promised Saudi Arabia to have what we call nuclear umbrella, if and when needed. It's not verified, but there are a lot of rumors spread about that. And now, on the last week, they signed together what we call a defense pact. That means that each one is responsible if one of them will be attacked, the other one will be joining and assisting it, kind of a NATO pact in a way. Turkey joined them, and Turkey now is playing what we call a double role because Turkey assisted Pakistan for a long time. And when Pakistan went into clashes with India on last May, Turkey was supporting it and supplying weapon systems, a new weapon system, an advanced one that actually took part in the fighting against India. And now Turkey joined these two countries to have what we call a mutual defense pact of these three countries. And somebody defined it as what we call the Muslim NATO Pact, which is a new creation in the Middle East. And of course, it should concern Israel because, first of all, Saudi Arabia joined these two countries. And of course, we know that Turkey is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, which of course is identified or related to Hamas, which of course is an enemy, the bitter enemy for Israel since October 7, 2023. And therefore, this is not a very good sign for Israel because if Turkey will get into clashes with Israel, we have what we call some risk that these two countries will join forces and get into this mixture as well.
Indeed. Well, an avoidable scenario, at least if proactive actions are undertaken. Mr. Oren, let's turn our attention briefly, if I may ask, to Lebanon, since we do see an uptick, in comparison to past weeks of targeted strikes against Hezbollah infrastructure. What are we to make out of it?
The most interesting fact regarding what is happening in Lebanon and has happened since November of 2024 is that it is a unilateral campaign. Hezbollah does not respond to the methodical Israeli campaign to uproot whatever sort of infrastructure Hezbollah is trying to reconstitute south of the Litani and sometimes in other parts of Lebanon, such as the eastern part of the Bekaa Valley or the central part of Beirut and its vicinity.
Mr. Oren, can that be construed because obviously following the Beeper operation on the 13th of September of 24 and then the subsequent strike of Hassan Nasrallah on the 17th of that month, and we saw the evolution of the various decapitating actions that really brought Hezbollah to its knees and really put it in a state of disarray. Is that state still existing today, to your knowledge?
Well, as you know, perhaps the most salient feature of quote unquote resistance movements is that they are not in a hurry. Time, they believe, is on their side in the long run. And they are trying not to be too hasty in their moves. And even on October the 8th, 2023, when Hassan Nasrallah decided to join Hamas in the fight against Israel, of which he was not aware of beforehand, and that was one reason Israel was not aware of it beforehand. Even then, Nasrallah decided on a war of attrition rather than on trying to raid the north of Israel. He was very cautious. And now with Nasrallah gone, the other leaders, those who have succeeded him, are afraid that Israel is trying to lure them into a trap. So they are sitting still. They are trying to rebuild their forces. They are trying to get more material and perhaps some money from Iran, even though Iran, as we know, is quite poor. Its economy has deteriorated. And they are trying to dictate the time and place and method of the next battle rather than to be tempted into it by Israel.
Indeed. Well, General Gavish on the Lebanese portfolio, obviously prior to the Third Lebanon War, as part of the multi-front war, we saw that Hezbollah, as Mr. Owen mentioned, was trying to lure Israel from the 8th of October of 2023 all the way to the 27th of November of 24 into a type of war of attrition. It thought that it had the upper hand while it was being outmaneuvered at every stop by the Israeli side. Some may call it a miracle, others prudent planning. But when it comes down to the current situation, I ask myself, since prior to the war then, there was the so-called Mabam, the campaign between the wars that was very aggressive in its nature. It sought to disrupt the transfer of weaponry into the hands of Hezbollah. And now what we're seeing is Israel having a Mabam Plus, where it not only tries to disrupt any type of munitions entering into the Lebanese theater, but also degrading infrastructure still existing in specific locations. Of course, it has set certain red lines to keep it under the threshold of escalation. But nonetheless, my question basically is Israel truly denying, or is Hezbollah being successful in rehabilitating?
I think that, and you know, Jonathan, we talked about it really more than once, that the main lesson learned of Israel coming out the 7th of October is exactly that. It's denial. If we're talking about our national strategy, this is the next pillar that, although we didn't write it down yet, but we are basically, this is how we are acting accordingly. It means that we won't allow our enemies to be in a capacity to try to destroy Israel or in a capacity to be a serious strategic threat toward Israel. And it goes also to the Hezbollah. We have to remember that almost 70% of their capabilities were destroyed. And the idea is really not to allow them to grow again. And Israel is doing it. And I think you gave a very good example when you've talked at the Mabam, which was the period between the wars that Israel was trying to stop the ammunition coming into Lebanon. We know that the success was limited, but we also know that the attack was not directly on Hezbollah. Now it's different. Now the attack is directly toward the Hezbollah, but we're not doing it out of the blue. We are doing it once the Hezbollah is behaving differently from what was agreed with the Hezbollah. So Israel is maintaining the agreement from one side, making sure that the Hezbollah won't rearm himself. And I can tell you that, within Israel, there are different thoughts about are we doing it enough? Should we do something more aggressive toward it? There are all kinds of different discussions. And the Hezbollah, if they would continue and try to break the agreement and to rearm, they might suffer out of it. And very unfortunate, we see that the Lebanese government still is not capable to do what it promised to do. So this is a very challenging situation if you combine it all.
Well, Hezbollah can be depicted as a wounded beast hanging off a cliff, unable to react. But at some point, either it falls down or it climbs back up. And that point should be taken into account. We don't have very much time left, but General Sofrin, I'd like to touch on Iran. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that an armada is on its way in the direction of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The United States is effectively encircling the Iranians during the 12-day war, obviously Operation Rising Lion. The State of Israel has decapitated much of the IRGC and its other forces and degraded its capabilities from the long-range, medium to long-range capabilities of ballistic missiles. The short-range arsenals were harmed, but not to the same degree, since Israel obviously didn't need to deal with what is out of range at the point in time. And the United States focused in its strike, Operation Midnight Hammer, on degrading 3 nuclear infrastructures. Now, if the United States does launch an attack, obviously this may cause a more immediate range, short-range ballistic missiles to come into play within this area of responsibility of Central Command. What are the scenarios we need to take into account?
First of all, nobody knows really what is the aim of this American attack if it happens. So far is only threats. There are only threats and not something that should be implied. They gather a lot of units around, begin engaging Iran tomorrow morning or the day after, doesn't really matter, in the coming days.
I've been informed that actually it has entered into the AOR, at least its aircraft are in reach of the Islamic Republic at this point.
Okay. So they're there and of course are capable in begin engaging Iran immediately, if and when needed or decided. In addition, you have a lot of aircraft that are being gathered in the Middle East, part of them in Jordan, part of them in other parts of the Middle East, and of course, refueling aircraft and so on. They build the capacity and signaling Iran that we are willing to use power in order to force you to do two things. The first one is to stop killing your people. Second, maybe to change kind of regime change, but not totally, because maybe Khamenei will be replaced by somebody else, but it's going to be the same type of this regime and not something else totally. It's not is going to be democracy anymore, or something like the days of the Shah before 1979. And the third issue is to force Iran to get into negotiations for a nuclear deal that will not enable Iran to enrich uranium on the Iranian soil and to give up all their stock of 400 plus enriched uranium to a third country or to somebody else. And in the end, to put an end to the Iranian ambition to build a nuclear capability.
Well, we are drawing really to the end of today's update. I'd like just very briefly, in the event that something happens naturally, do not listen to unofficial channels or all kind of public information channels, since there's going to be a lot of disinformation, obviously, out in the public sphere. Therefore, just listen to the official channels and the Home Front Command. General Gavish obviously always speaks about the necessity to do so and not to just take it easily, because obviously any type of measure does save lives, and that is vital. Mr. Oren, closing sentence.
Well, you know, ahead of the 1991 war with Iraq, there were fears that the million-man army of Saddam Hussein will be quite a challenge to the US forces or the coalition forces. It wasn't. On the other hand, we saw last year that after 45 days of clashes with the Houthis, the Trump administration called it quits. So it's between these two poles. Let's not fear too much what could happen with Iran, but let's not assume right now that it will be a piece of cake.
Indeed. Well, you never know how you get into a war. You know how you get in, you don't know how you get out. With that, I'd like to immediately thank General Gavish, General Sofrin, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights today. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well and wish you a Shabbat Shalom from here in Jerusalem. And until our next update. Until then.